Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart, and today we're going to be talking about how a big Legend of Zelda Blowout Direct could work. It is believed by many that we are getting a Nintendo Direct in this month of September, which, to be totally honest, is not at all shocking. Why? Well, we've gotten a Nintendo Direct every single September throughout the entire Switch era. Even the pandemic year, we got the major Mario 35th Anniversary Direct and a partner showcase. So I don't think this year is going to be any different. I think we are going to have a September Nintendo Direct, especially because Nintendo skipped a major presentation this summer, and because it's being reported by a number of different venues and sites, including, and most importantly, were the initial people who broke the news, Jeff Grubb. He's saying Twilight Princess, Wind Waker HD, they're coming, and they're going to be announced this September in a Direct, and also Metroid Prime Remaster is getting announced soon as well to come out this holiday. So it's all pointing towards major news this month, and with the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild due for this spring 2023, assuming it's not delayed, Nintendo needs to talk about it in a September Nintendo Direct. It's the last known time of the year where Nintendo can have a major presentation where we can envision them actually giving us a proper blowout for this major game. Not to mention, we don't know anything else for next year, so a September Nintendo Direct is the ideal scenario for Nintendo to start giving us information about things to come next year when we know nothing but Breath of the Wild 2. So how is that going to work? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Now before we jump into things, let me first very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or perhaps consider joining as a member. So before I talk about what I think is going to happen, I want to talk about a couple other possibilities. So one possibility that comes to mind is that maybe we will not get a general Nintendo Direct. Instead, we may get a Zelda-focused Direct. And when I say Zelda-focused, I mean entirely Zelda, a Zelda Direct, like a Xenoblade Direct or a Splatoon Direct, but for Zelda. So actually, probably the best comparison would be the Mario 35th Anniversary Direct. Because for the Splatoon 3 Direct and the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Direct, those were for specific games. And in this scenario, I'm talking about at least 3 different Zelda games being shown off. Those being the long-rumored ports for both The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, and then of course there is Breath of the Wild 2. That one needs a full blowout. We need to learn so much about the game. We don't know the date of its actual release, we don't know the name, we don't know really too much about the gameplay concepts. Right now, from what we've seen, it basically looks like a DLC for Breath of the Wild, yet this is the largest gap we've ever seen between 2 major Zelda games. So they've obviously been working on something here. What is that? What kind of content or mechanics are we looking at? There's a lot to tell us right now, so they need to give us a lot of information, especially if the game is actually truly coming this spring. So a Zelda-focused Direct would be a great way to handle that. And if they do that, I could perhaps envision a scenario where they just have like a trailer drop for the Metroid Prime Remaster that is supposedly coming this holiday. The issue with this strategy is that it seems like, if you take a look at how Nintendo's been handling things, and there are exceptions, Paper Mario Origami King comes to mind, but basically what I'm saying is that Nintendo usually saves major announcements to happen during Directs, and that's pretty much it. Smaller things happen outside Directs, that's possible, and like I said, the only exception that comes to mind, at least the most recent exception, is Paper Mario the Origami King, but that was during 2020, the big pandemic year, so everything was different during that time. But then also, we still know nothing about next year. And as I said earlier, Nintendo needs to start talking about that too. So I think it would actually be strange for Nintendo to have just a Zelda Direct. There needs to be more than that. So I think it does make sense to have more of a general Direct. But another possibility beyond a general Nintendo Direct is a Nintendo Direct Mini. And in there, they can tell us about multiple game projects and give us announcements for games to come out in the early part of next year. That's a possibility. But if that happens, I think we could be looking at a scenario where Breath of the Wild 2 is getting delayed. I could see there being a Direct Mini where they give us a release date for Advance Wars, they give us a release date for the Metroid Prime Remaster and obviously also announce it. And they also announced Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, but maybe they don't even come out this year, they come out early next year. And those games, among a few other hopefully nice surprise announcements, maybe an F-Zero for example, those things come out early next year. But it may also come with the announcement of Breath of the Wild 2 coming out a little bit later. Heck, maybe they still even give us some sort of trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 during a Direct Mini, but it'll be more of a tease and more of a specific release timing that's even later than we expected. So not like March, but maybe closer to summer or perhaps beyond. That's another possibility. I think that's the most disappointing possibility, but still there could be some great things there if that's what happens. But what I actually think is happening is that we are getting a legitimate, general, standard Nintendo Direct, the big one. A lot of people have been making the argument that a lot of the big companies are having their major announcements in September. It almost feels like the month of September is the true E3 time this year. And maybe that's the case, considering what's happened with all the semiconductor shortages and the ramifications and the long-term impacts that COVID has had on the industry with how games are taking even longer to be made. It may very well be the case that later into the year, this September, this month is when a lot of the major companies are ready to make more major announcements for their major projects. That could be, at least for Nintendo, that's how it's kind of looking. But regardless, the main reason why I think there's going to be a general Nintendo Direct is because we don't know anything for next year beyond Breath of the Wild 2, and they need to give us that information, and there are certain bigger projects that need to be discussed that probably would be saved for a general Nintendo Direct, like a Metroid Prime Remake, like perhaps a title reveal for Breath of the Wild 2, and maybe other cool awesome things, like maybe F-Zero. Fingers crossed, we shall see on that one. There's a number of other crazy things that could happen instead of that, but we'll see. Anyways, how will this happen exactly? Will we actually be getting a Zelda Blowout, even though I think we're getting a general Nintendo Direct? Yes, both things can still be true. Here's a great example. Back at E3 2018, that's exactly what happened, but for Super Smash Bros. It was a general Nintendo Direct, but with a major focus on Smash Bros. The first half was about everything else but Smash Bros., and then the second half was about Smash Bros. I think they can basically do the same thing, except instead of Smash, is Zelda, and that's pretty much how it's gonna work. I think within the next couple weeks, you're gonna be seeing on Twitter and other social media sites Nintendo putting out a post saying, hey, tune in on such and such date, maybe the 14th, to see a general Nintendo Direct focusing on projects coming out early next year, including a focus on the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think that's kind of what they're going to sort of say. So the idea here is that they're going to have a big sort of showcase for Breath of the Wild 2, at least 5 minutes I would say, of this major game, but then also talking about other Zelda projects like Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, and that'll end up being like a third or maybe even close to a half of the Direct. That's what I anticipate happening. And then everything else, well, that'll be other cool things that Nintendo could be announcing during a Direct. Now, I guess since we're talking about a Zelda-focused Direct, could there be anything beyond the 3 Zelda games we've already mentioned? I don't think there's a need. I think us simply getting information on Breath of the Wild 2 is huge, and getting announcements for those other 2 Zelda remasters is also huge. But maybe there could be more. Maybe there could be some sort of Zelda eShop release. Maybe they can announce a Zelda spin-off. Those are possibilities. If we're looking at a scenario where Breath of the Wild 2 could be getting delayed, maybe they announce more than just the Zelda remasters to tide things over. It's possible. Do I think so? No, I don't. I think it's Breath of the Wild 2 and the Zelda remasters. That's what we're going to be seeing in terms of Zelda content this September, which is a lot. It's definitely more than enough to qualify as a Zelda Blowout, because we're going to be getting some actual significant information for Breath of the Wild 2, which has been a really, really long time coming. That's what I think, at least. We shall see what actually happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.